in listening to the charges from the judge, who's, as you know, very conflicted and corrupt, because of the confliction, very, very corrupt. Mother Teresa could not beat these charges. These charges are rigged. The whole thing is rigged. It's a disgrace. And I mean that. Mother Teresa could not beat those charges, but we'll see. We'll see how we do. I think the people of this country see that this is a rigged deal. It's a weaponized deal for the Democrats to hit their political opponent.
Mother Teresa could not beat these charges. So says former President Donald Trump. You know, he's probably right. But before we explain why he's probably right about that, why don't we take a step back a little bit and explain at how exactly it is that we have gotten to this point. There are 4 criminal prosecutions currently pending against President Donald Trump. Alvin Bragg, the Soros-funded prosecutor in New York County, New York, he was the first out of the gate. He was the first one to drop his 34-count indictment over a year ago now in April of 2023. Let's take a look at those charges, though. We're going to circle back to what's happening right now in the courtroom. But I think it's important just to set the scene and just do a very brief surveying of the land and a quick rundown of the calendar. Alvin Bragg's 34-count indictment drops 34 misdemeanor charges for New York State fraudulent bookkeeping. Now, that particular charge in New York State, lest I remind you, has a 2-year statute of limitations built into it. What that means is that the actual underlying charge for Alvin Bragg, this Soros-funded prosecutor who literally campaigned for office on an explicit Get Trump platform, yes, he literally did do that, those 34 counts actually told around 2018 or so because of the 2-year statute of limitations. All along, what Alvin Bragg's theory of the case has been, along with Matthew Colangelo, the former third-ranking member in the Joe Biden Department of Justice, who is now moonlighting as Alvin Bragg's, as the Robin to his Batman there in the New York County, New York DA's office. The Bragg-Colangelo theory of the case, dare I say also the Judge Juan Merchan theory of the case, because the judge seems to be just in with the prosecution at this point. The theory of the case has been that the way to get around a 2-year statute of limitations while simultaneously elevating this misdemeanor offense to a felony, thereby opening up the possibility of putting Donald Trump in literal handcuffs and incarcerating him off in Rikers Island. Their theory has been that the fraudulent bookkeeping charges were actually done in furtherance of something else. Emphasis on ... something else. Notably, in the indictment last year when it dropped in April 2023, Alvin Bragg never said what that something else was. And here we are, about to get a verdict in the first ever criminal trial of a former president of the United States, and we still don't know what that something else is. We had closing arguments that took place yesterday, and the debate in general over the past 36 to 48 hours, or really the debate going back for at least a week or two now, has been, what are the jury instructions going to be? How are the jury instructions going to possibly account for the fact that the prosecution to date has not actually told us what their theory of the case is? You know, I've made this point on my daily show here on the First America on Trial so often because it just bears repeating. We are in the uncharted waters, the uncharted territory of a former president of the United States being criminally charged, possibly sent off in handcuffs to Rikers Island. And they literally have not said what the actual predicate offense is. They have not ever bothered to fill in that in furtherance of. They have floated the possibility that it is a New York State campaign finance violation. They have floated the possibility that it is a federal United States Code campaign finance violation, which, by the way, Alvin Bragg, as a New York County, New York local DA, doesn't even have jurisdiction to bring that one. Doesn't have jurisdiction to bring a federal campaign finance law violation. Then they have floated the possibility that maybe it is some sort of tax violation. So all along, this jury instruction debate has boiled down to this. Will the jury instructions say what the actual crime is? Will it include what lawyers call the relevant mens rea, the specific intentionality needed, the specific mentality, the specific mental state, the subjective mental state of the criminal defendant? You know, back when I was in law school, back when I was taking criminal law my first year back at the University of Chicago Law School, you learned that every crime has 2 parts: a mens rea, which is your mentality, and then the actus reus. That's the actual literal act. For example, if you are prosecuting someone for Homicide, the way that you can differentiate, among other factors, between manslaughter, first-degree murder, and so forth, is what is the mens rea? Was it premeditated in cold blood? Was it a negligent homicide and so forth there? The judge here, Juan Merchan, not only has completely elided any possible consideration of relevant mens rea, the jury instructions go even further than that. In what the always exceptional legal commentator Jonathan Turley refers to as a coup de grace, for former President Trump. And I hope and pray that Jonathan Turley is wrong on that. But he said earlier today, and this has been corroborated elsewhere, that the jury instructions include a deliberate omission, a deliberate decision not to fill in what that in furtherance of predicate offense is. Put another way, if the 12 jurors, let's say 4 of them say that the in furtherance of from the fraudulent bookkeeping is actually in furtherance of a New York State campaign finance law. Let's say that 4 more say that it is in furtherance of a federal campaign finance law. And then let's say that the final 4 say that it is in furtherance of a tax evasion. For purposes of a criminal conviction, Judge Merchan is going to treat that as the required unanimity that would mean that Donald Trump is convicted. Guys, the fix is in. This thing has been jury-rigged from the outset. Robert De Niro, the whole Biden campaign apparatus there outside the courtroom yesterday, literally showing to the world what many of us have said for months and months now, which is that this is not a legal proceeding. This is not a criminal trial. This is a politicized lawfare apparatus vehicle that the Democrat lawfare complex, as I call it, is now increasingly forced to put all of their eggs in this particular basket. All the others are collapsing. In Georgia, the Fani Willis case, that's not getting the trial before November. In Florida, the classified documents case, Judge Aileen Cannon's been doing a great job of slow walking there. That's not getting to a trial before November in all likelihood either. In Washington, D.C., similarly unlikely. We are now waiting for the U.S. Supreme Court to tell us what happens when it comes to the scope and breadth and depth of presidential immunity. So the Democrat lawfare complex is putting all of its eggs into this rotten, fetid New York City basket. And they know it too. That is why they are pulling out all the stunts. That is why the Democrat partisan judge, Juan Merchan, who literally donated to the Joe Biden 2020 campaign, whose daughter, Lauren Merchan, has fundraised up to $93 million for her well-connected, well-heeled Democratic fundraising and political clients based on the fact that her daddy might become the first judge to incarcerate a former president. That is why they have not ceded an inch. Why would they? They're on the 1-yard line at this point. Folks, if you are a red-blooded American patriot, if you are a constitutionalist, if you, like me, if you love this country with every fiber of your being, if you proudly wave the flag on July 4th, if you reread Jefferson's eloquent rhetoric in the Declaration, if you love our Constitution, our separation of powers, our federalist structure, our Bill of Rights, all of that, it doesn't matter what your partisan affiliation is. It doesn't actually matter who you hope to be president of the United States this November. If you love this country, you have to be rooting for an acquittal or a hung jury, in this case, the people of the state of New York versus Donald J. Trump. This case is an absolute farce. Some of the other cases maybe could have gone in a different direction. The classified documents case in Florida, okay. If Jack Smith, the special counsel, had prosecuted on a different charge, if he had eschewed an Espionage Act prosecution, had decided to just go with obstruction of justice, he actually might have had a case. He didn't do that, obviously, but he might have had a case. But this case, where the jury is deliberating and they don't even know what the actual black letter criminal statute that they are supposed to be assessing and adjudicating is. We have crossed a Rubicon, folks, and it is not a pretty Rubicon at all.